So what I'm using to get started with, I've got my medium charcoal pencil here, kneaded eraser, I've got white charcoal and the carbon pencil. And that's what I'm gonna work with from the start. I could use vine charcoal in the initial gesture stage, which might be a wise choice because it'll get out of the way after you're done. It'll leave kind of a ghost of what you did, but it'll get out of the way while you draw. So I would recommend doing that, especially if you find that you press too hard out the gate. That vine charcoal can save you from that a little bit. Okay, and then another thing that I've got right now is this book. This is my preferred anatomy book of the moment, this Morpho book, because it's got just hundreds of pages of anatomy in just various positions. It has all of the muscles labeled and the bones have their own labels. So anywhere you see number 10, it's going to be the trapezius muscle, right? So this book is really nice because there's such a variety of poses and the models are drawn. The anatomy reference is drawn rather than like a 3D computer program that like I use and so on. You can see kind of an artistic interpretation of the anatomy, which is really helpful. I would recommend working your way through this book and just kind of doing some studies of these drawings, just recreate them, try and figure out why the artist chose to do things particular ways, and so on. So I'm going to be using this, and I've got a pretty good history with anatomy. I'm still going to have a reference on deck just in case, and I would recommend that as well. Just a note about anatomy also, this is going to be dipping our toes in. Right? Anatomy is something you could study all the rest of your days, but we're just gonna at least get a start here, learning the names of the muscles, getting some experience with drawing them. So as long as you're careful, be careful, try and understand what you're seeing, use your reference to good effect, then your drawings will turn out good. They may not be masterpieces at the start, but you'll get there. It's just a lifelong study thing. Right? It's not something within 3 months you're going to be a master of anatomy, but you'll have some good foundation. Well, with 3 months, we're doing it in 3 weeks, so my goodness. All right, so let's break down this torso, and I'm just going to draw this drawing like normal. I'm working on my gray paper, by the way. That's why I have that white charcoal. Let's check that. I'm going to apologize about my ability to speak being severely hampered by drawing. There's something in my brain that just won't let me talk and draw at the same time without serious stutter situation. I'm just gathering overall relationships. This is what my stand-in as a gesture. I noticed this guy's really quite angular. There's a big triangle of the torso, so that's kind of where I started. I want to get that angle correct between the shoulders. I'm a little bit steep. Angle from that one back. That's not too shabby. And I'm kind of gesturing in the arms and stuff, but I'm not really gonna finish them out so much. I'm just looking at the torso in this drawing. Here's that V of the neck, like we talked about. I definitely want to make sure that makes it in. So my stacked triangles are somewhat like that. Ooh. Let me scoot us back just a little bit so we can see the whole thing. There we go. That might be a little better. Face. And essentially I'm just treating this like a straight line block in drawing. So I'm not even thinking, other than just like noticing where things are, I'm not really thinking anatomy yet. I'm just making a trail for myself. There's some overlapping in here. And what I will say is I'm gonna get myself in trouble saying it, but I'm gonna say it anyway. Having a nice drawing, having a good drawing that works it's more important than the anatomy being perfect. Ideally, you've got both, but you really want to focus on the drawing before you dig into all the different anatomical stuff that's going on. Make sure your drawing is working. All right, I've noticed something right now, and it's that it's been a while since I measured something, so I'm going to slow down for a second and just check and see if there's anything that's bugging me even in this initial stage. And there's one thing that's jumping out to me immediately, and it's this. That shoulder feels like it's dislocated. And I have to figure out why is that? Why does that shoulder feel dislocated? So I'm gonna take some measurements. The top of the shoulder, horizontal with the wrist, with the chin, wrist. Maybe slightly above actually. Yeah, so that horizontal measurement seems okay. I'm gonna check the distance here and compare it to something I trust, which is not much at this point. Maybe the neck or maybe the hips down here. So if I take that distance, significantly longer than the neck, wider than the neck. It's like the neck is like 75% of that distance. And here they're the same. So I already know this is either the neck is too wide, which I don't feel like it is, or this is far too thin, which it does truly feel like it is. Let me check this angle. The angle's not bad. Let's check the angle between the neck and that hip. There it is. So this needs to move out significantly, and this is about what I saw when I measured the neck. That was about the width of this area, so this gets me closer. And then that line is going to disappear by the time I'm finished with this drawing. That line's not going to matter. I'm staying pretty light-handed right now. Another thing in this format is I think I tend to repeat myself quite a bit, but hey, that's not bad. I say that because what I was going to say is I'm going to do the drawing first. I'm just going to make sure that the drawing is feeling good before I add the anatomy to it. Where's that intersection? Comes straight down. So that needs to be in a little bit. You'll also see I'm doing the straight line block in here. I highly encourage you to use this method because you'll be catching stuff. You'll be catching anatomical things. You'll be catching really descriptive structural stuff if you use it. If you don't, your figure could end up feeling kind of blobby, like a little too rounded everywhere, which isn't necessarily bad if all of the structural stuff is still represented. It's just that being blobby like that makes you much more likely to leave that structural information out and end up with like a Michelin Man kind of balloon character instead. I'm going to pull something here from several weeks ago, which is the negative shape right here through the arm, between the arm and body. I'm looking at the white right there, the negative shape, instead of trying to draw the different parts of the anatomy. Oh, let me check. Or rather, the contours, rather. I'm going to check the width of that arm and check it against the neck. It goes about to there. So maybe a little bit thin. It was looking really thin to me, but it's in the back, and I double checked it with the neck. It felt pretty good. guess the neck is going to be my basis of comparison. The hips are 1, almost 2 exactly of the neck. 1, it's 2 exactly, so I feel pretty good there. Pubis is going to be somewhere there. Navel, xiphoid process, sternal notch. There's that initial, that line that runs through all of those. That's my center line. You can see how close it is, that center line that runs down the front of the body. You can see how close it is to the edge here and how far away it is there. That's something I can check. How many times does this compare to the rest? It's like 5. Once I get to 4 or 5, like how many times does this go? 1, 2, 3, 4. 4, but ish, because my ability to make a mistake compounds every time I do that. So I'm just going to see if it's somewhere close. 1, 2, 3. It's roughly close. It could be a little bit thinner, I think. When you're measuring, I would stick to one-to-one comparisons or like thereabouts. You'll be more accurate that way. If you find yourself counting, like how many times does pick something, how many times does this ab go into the height of the figure and you're ending up with like 15, it's useless at that point. Too much room for error. But it's really nice to be like, how does the neck compare to that? Well, this, when I go from armpit to that joint, across the neck, it's 1 and plus a quarter or a little bit. That's a lot easier to measure. Again, this is just the negative shape. Right in this little joint here is where ASIS is, that hip, and the other ASIS is going to be somewhere around here, and I can check the angle to see what the hips are doing. They're not perfectly horizontal from each other, but they are pretty close. I feel pretty good about that. All right, I'm going to make this center line just a little clearer. Good, that's ending up where it should. I'm kind of describing these tendinous intersections of the abs, but I'm not really digging into them with hard contours because they're not folds of skin, they're not edges, they're just little bits of shadow or little bits of darker area. So I'm not really going to commit to those lines later in the drawing very strongly. The lines I commit to are lines that describe edges of things, so when something goes from facing you to the side like that, that's a good time for a committed line. When something's just a little, like wrinkles in your hand or something, may not be the best time for a line. I think my computer is struggling to keep up. Check those intersections. They are directly underneath the nipple, which is directly underneath that. So straight down. So I'm too far in with those. That's something where I think I'm gonna kill those lines a little bit. That comes straight down like that. That'll help guide me. So my measuring corrections are just ongoing. And at this stage of the drawing, that's good. I don't want to get locked into something at this stage, heavens no. from this, I'm gonna place that nipple, and the other one's right here, but this one, it's gonna be a nice landmark, so I'm gonna try and place it properly. Right now it's just kind of gestural. There. So I'm triangulating, like what's the angle between navel and that nipple? How does that triangle look? If I line up, ooh, that's a nice little continuity line. If I go from the chin down through the neck, so carry this and head towards this hip, the nipple falls right on that line, more or less. Just double check. It's a little bit in. I've got it just about in the right spot. I'm pretty comfortable with that. That's gonna help me with this. This is that Serratus Anterior. Again, I'm not really describing it yet. There's some pretty strong contours, these folds of skin. Now I'm getting a little bit braver with those lines. That felt too pointy, so I'm shaving it off just a little bit. One thing you'll notice about the neck that's worth remembering is that very seldom does it stick straight up out of the top of the body. And I mentioned that a little bit in the anatomy lecture, but notice how the torso here is more, I mean, it's leaning a little bit, but it's kind of straight up. But you get to that neck and it shoots forward. It's kind of like if this is the rib cage there, instead of the neck sticking up out of the top like that, I don't know if you can see that, that's not really what a neck does. Instead, it kind of, an exaggeration, but it kind of sticks forward out of that rib cage. That's something worth remembering. If you look at it side on, it's kind of like, there's the ribs, there's the neck, there's the head, if I'm just being real basic with it. That forward lean, it will help things feel a little more natural. I always like to find an excuse to double up the contour on this, on a side like this. So we have the silhouette edge, which is kind of this straight line there. But then just in from that, we have the edge of the abs themselves, and this one kind of actually pokes out. And this one as well. A little bit there. Something to describe that little, the way that it turns around that corner, and having two contour edges there helps in a way that I probably won't do it as much over here, particularly if I'm heading for a full value, like shaded drawing. All right, I feel reasonable about this torso, reasonable enough to start figuring out what the muscles are doing. And I would use your book for this part. If you don't have your book, you're gonna have to do the best you can with a handout and the other stuff, but the book is really helpful because chances are I might even find a pose that's similar to this one that I'm looking at, and that's just gonna make my job a lot easier figuring out what's going on, provided I trust the artist who did this book, which I do. This one's a little bit similar. Arms going forward, but kind of the angle is close. So anyway, use your book. Or if you're drawing, I mean, you'll be drawing this, draw along with me, we'll do it together. But this practice, this way of doing this, I would highly recommend having your reference out. All right, so where are we gonna start with the muscles? Let's start with the big stuff, the big easy stuff. That's where I like to start. So I find the big stuff that I know and then fill in the little gaps of what might still be foggy to me. And the easiest thing for me is straight down the front. So Pectoralis Major, Rectus Abdominis, and Sternocleidomastoideus, those are relatively easy to find. So here I'm deviating from the model in front of me and I'm starting to draw the muscles themselves. So I know this is like a big tube that comes down and gets thin like that towards the sternal notch. Sternal notch is here. And I also know it's got a little bit of it that juts to the side like that too. And then it goes up behind the ear. There are some muscles here in this little gap of the neck. We're not going to worry too much about those. They're small and you'll get there someday in your anatomy journey, but not today. We don't need to learn all the little tiny stuff. And this one. So I feel pretty decent about that as sternocleidomastoideus. I might add just a little sense of like the cartilage and stuff in here, so it's not just a blank. The trapezius muscle, that big muscle on the upper back that goes from the base of the skull to the middle of the back and out to the shoulders, you can actually see it here. It's here and there, so it peaks up over the shoulders, especially if you're one of those big weightlifter dudes. They have these big old monster trapeziuses. This guy would, if he shrugged his shoulders, you'd see those big bumps because he's pretty built. Incidentally, we're picking a really muscly built model because it's the easiest to see this stuff on. You can see these bony landmarks and musculature and stuff all the way down to rather thin, non-muscular folks as well. It just happens to be much more obvious in this model, and so that's where we're going to start. So I'm just defining those trapezius, those parts of the trapezius a little more carefully. Okay, Pectoralis Major, what are they doing? I know that that muscle starts here, all along this T. It's like this, oops, hit my mic. It's like this T here and down the sternum. So if you just think of the upper part of the chest as a T, then the one arm of the T and the column of the T, more or less, is where this muscle attaches. And it shoots out towards the shoulder, so I can feel pretty confident throwing in some lines that head that direction. It kind of starts wide and then it gets thin as it goes up. And it comes out to this bit of the arm out here. So I'm just going to follow that line. Same here. I'm kind of thinking about the design of this right now. I want it to swoop off the shoulder and down to the bottom of this T. And there's a little bit that attaches down here too. So I've got this nice curve at the top. I've got this nice curve at the bottom, both of them S curves. It's going to make that feel a lot more organic, a lot more muscle-like. Throw some fibers going this way. Don't get too carried away with muscle fibers on this drawing. It's more important that you show the difference between the muscles. We're not going to draw this one out in this drawing, though I normally would. It's a shoulder muscle. We'll talk about that when we get to the arm. All right, what's the other one doing? What I like to do is find where the muscle starts and where it ends. So here's this part of that T. There's a little shadow dip right there that shows us the difference between this muscle and that shoulder muscle. So I'm going to keep track of that. Inside this part of the T. Down, and it attaches out here on the arm, so it's going to come under here and then up, but I can't just connect it like that because it's not actually doing that. We're seeing it wrap around first and then out to the arm, so there's going to be an edge, then maybe a little tick. The reason I can tell that in this reference is because of how strong this border edge is here. In fact, I might see just a tad bit. Even that feels like it's too much visible, like it's not leaving enough room for this muscle. So I'm going to downplay that. All right, so I have sternocleidomastoideus, I've got Pectoralis Major. Now Rectus Abdominis. This one's the more obvious one for this particular model. One thing about these tendinous intersections too is that they will be very obvious up in the top part here. You very seldom see them separate, like this center line. You very seldom see it separate down here. There's just, even in rather built models, there's always some under the skin fat or tissue that just kind of fills that line in. So you see the horizontal lines, you see the vertical line about to the belly button. Rule of thumb, I would say. Here's where I'm going to define these out where I wouldn't normally in the drawing. Because in the drawing they're just little bits of light and shadow, but in the anatomy study I'm trying to describe the individual muscles. Still not going to make a terribly strong border between them. I might just throw a few little reminders of which way the muscle is going here. I'll probably dress that out further later. I'm going to go ahead and firm up the contours for the belly button, or navel if you want to be fancy. This is the external abdominal oblique, or the abdominal oblique. I'm not going to worry about that one that's behind, tucked back in there. I kind of already have it just because of doing these. All right, here's the abdominal oblique. I'm looking for it to wrap up around and go underneath some of the back muscles that are going to be poking through here. So I think what I'll do is I'll save this triangle right here until I figure out what these muscles that come around from the back are doing. So in that position, I'm expecting latissimus dorsi and teres major, and here they are. There's latissimus dorsi, there's teres major. So they kind of wrap it from the armpit down to around the back. So I need to go from armpit down and around the back like that. And then teres major follows a similar path. So those two muscles belong to the back. Now I can put my Serratus Anterior in. We can see that on this model pretty clearly. Gets a little fuzzy down here. And that's going to leave us with the abdominal oblique here, which I can describe with a little bit of contour up here, striations or whatever. And then it bulges out at the bottom. This is kind of a bulgy area of it. I might change this curve just to show that off a little bit more. It comes over the top of ACIS and shoots down towards pubis as well. And I think that covers just about all of the stuff I can see in this particular pose. The abs I'm not very happy with at the moment, and I think it's because I decided to lay these lines in just a little harder than I should have. So I'm going to back them up just a little bit. Reimagine this area. Tease out the contours that are actually important. Don't be afraid to make changes like that either, by the way. The drawing doesn't have to be perfect from the start. Who could live up to that kind of pressure, my goodness. I'll tell you who could live up to that kind of pressure. Your favorite Instagram speed painter who's done the same drawing / painting 750 times, and so they already know all the strokes and have them memorized. I would not, if I were you, here's where I'm going to wax profound for a second. I apologize in advance, but I would not look at Instagram or YouTube or whatever as sort of a basis of comparison of where you need to be. It reminds me of the sketchbook tours that people do. And every page of their sketchbook is just a glorious, beautiful example of a drawing. And you're just like, this is their sketchbook? I am a total schlub. And it's like, that is not really, it's beautiful, there's no doubt. Talented for sure. That's not what a sketchbook is for. Right? It's to explore ideas and to give yourself room to make mistakes and to do stuff strange. So And I guess the same goes for looking at artists online. It can be very inspirational, but can also be demoralizing sometimes. Don't let it be. It needs to be wider. It's easy to say, hard to do, I realize. Don't let it be. Oh, I never thought about it that way. I guess all my insecurities are now gone. Do the best you can, I guess. All right, and that was medium charcoal pencil the whole time. I don't even think I need to come in with this carbon pencil. I think the drawing got far enough with the medium charcoal pencil. I might come dress up a few of these contours, but how much difference is it making? Not much. White charcoal, if I wanted to come through and say, oh, hey, I don't know, this is catching a bit more light. Even that's not terribly necessary. But if you've got the time and the desire, it can make the drawing look nicer. All right, I'm gonna leave it there. I've spent enough time. I want to have you sit here looking forever. So for these drawings, you don't have to do them on the toned paper. I just kind of prefer to work on toned paper by default. You can work on white paper. This drawing I did at 18 by 24. It's my preferred working size. I feel bad y'all are working at 11 by 14. That just seems so small to me. 18 by 24 gives me the opportunity to use my shoulder quite a lot. But it is what it is. We're working from home, so 11 by 14 it is. Just avoid too much of this action. Try to keep your shoulder and arm, in it. And that'll be good enough for this drawing. All right, I'm calling it.